Good to see everybody.
I'm in the way, the bright and shining way. I'm in the glory land way. Telling the world that Jesus saves today. Yes, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is near and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. Listen to the call, the gospel call today. Get in the glory land way. Wanderers come home, oh, hasten to obey, for I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way. Onward I go, rejoicing in His love. I'm in the glory land way. Soon I shall see Him in that home above. Oh, I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. I'm in the glory land way. Heaven is nearer and the way groweth clearer, for I'm in the glory land way.
693. We're going to sing 693, 694, the servant song and part of the servant. And we'll go right out of one into the other if you want to have your song to look out. After this, I'd ask Joe, Phil, would you dismiss us to our life?
Give me the heart of a servant, tender, faithful, and true. Fill me with love and use me, O Lord, so that the world can see you. Give me the heart of a servant, tender and faithful and true. Fill me with love, then use me, O Lord, so that the world can see you. Lord, make me a servant. Lord, make me like you. For you are a servant. Make me one too. Lord, make me a servant. Do what you must do to make me a servant. Make me like you.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for everything. We know it all is yours. We have everything that we have is yours. We are yours, and we ask you, dear God, to continue to bless us. We thank you for the opportunity this morning to come together to study from your word. Help us this morning to be attentive to your word, to learn from it so that we can realize how great you are and what you have done for us and what you're going to do for us. We ask you to bless our teachers this morning, bless our students. Help us always to look to serve you in Christ's name. Amen.
Roger them run off on you, didn't he? He's some. Yeah, he's on vacation.
Good morning. Lesson plan 50 this morning. Moving on through. There's not a lot left in this first commentary. We're finishing it up, moving to the second one. It won't take long to get there. So this morning we're going to be talking about Jesus as he withdraws from Herod's territory, which is Galilee. In the commentary, it was pages 505 to 513. Set the background. Just for this morning's lesson, I'm going to go back to when he fed the 5,000. So he was on the northeast corner of the Sea of Galilee, approximately in this area. Remember what happened? He fed the 5,000, which was composed mainly of Jews, right? So after that, immediately he sends his disciples westward toward Capernaum. They actually, we talked about the storm when he walked on water. They ended up a little bit south of there. So he's there with his disciples. They get out. He makes his way up north to Capernaum. And he taught the lesson about the bread of life, and that's where Christ was when he was teaching that. It was not a good day for him. In John chapter 6, verse 66, it says, that day, as a result of his teaching, many of his disciples moved on. They walked no more with Christ. It was just too hard for them, that teaching was. Wednesday night, Clint taught us about traditions. He was still at Capernaum at this time while he was teaching this. You remember what happened? The scribes, Pharisees came in, and it was on purpose. They're looking at this point, for his destruction. They had a plan. They're looking to kill him. So he's here. They're working. They're trying to get him taken care of, and it's a tough spot for him. But it's part of the plan that God had laid out for him. So he's alone for the most part as far as, my life on earth is coming to an end. I know this. I mean, as far as my human life, we know that he does come back. He's resurrected. He's on earth another 40 days in his resurrected form. But his time's drawn, near. And so he's going to withdraw from this region of Galilee. He's going to get away from Herod. And that's going to be the setting this morning as we move through this lesson. So it's hard to see what's really bad. So he's here. We're going to see that he's going to move up into the area of Phoenicia, which is on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. He's going to move into Tyre, go up to Sidon. He's going to make his way back around again, avoiding the area of Galilee. He's going to end up in the Decapolis as we finish up the lesson this morning. As far as we know, this is the first time, according to the scriptures, the information we have that Christ is going to be in this area of Phoenicia. We know that he's been in Decapolis before. Who remembers what happened when he was in Decapolis last time? I need somebody to read for me here. Let's read Mark chapter 5, verses 16 through 20. We'll start with Leah when she gets there. So Mark chapter 5, 16 through 20. Again, this is the last time that Christ was in the area of the Decapolis.
Verse 16. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon possessed, and about the swine.
Then they began to plead with him to depart from their region.
As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed begged to go with him.
However, Jesus did not permit him, and said to him, Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you.
And he departed and began to proclaim in
Decapolis.
all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled.
Okay. So he's been here before. As we go through the lesson this morning, think about the individuals at that time, Mark chapter 5, and as we go through Mark chapter 7, how they change, how the crowd changes as we progress through that. All right, so the text this morning is going to pull from Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 31. Then we'll just read from Mark chapter 7, and that'll be our main text, verses 24 through 37. If you'll turn over to Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 24, and we'll go through verse 37.
And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden.
For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet.
The woman was a Greek, a Synagogue by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devils out of her daughter.
He said to her, Allow the children to be satisfied first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs.
But she answered him, Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, For such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter.
When she was come to his house, she found the devil gone out and her daughter lay on the bed.
Again, departing from region Tyre and Sidon, he came through the midst of the region of the Decapolis of the Sea of Galilee.
Then they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him.
And he took him aside from the multitude privately, and put his fingers into his ears. And he spat and touched his tongue.
And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said unto him, that is, be opened.
And his ears were open, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly.
And he gave them orders not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them, the more widely they continued to proclaim it.
They were utterly astonished, saying, He has done all things well. He makes even the deaf to hear and the mute to speak.
All right, so remember, at this time what the attitude of the Jews actually was. And this began back in Mark chapter 3, verse 6. This is when this all began. Remember, he was teaching in the synagogue. He healed the man with the lame hand, and after that, they went out and immediately began conspiring with the Herodians against him to not put him to death. So this is where this all began. It started there in John chapter 7. We know in Judea, he was avoiding that area. The Jews were looking to kill him, but he had a mission. He had work that had to be done, even though he knew that his time was drawing near. But these individuals, they had a plan, and we know from what Clint taught us, it was in action. That's what they were doing. They went to Capernaum, they went to confront him, and they're doing their best right now to get him. Again, we're going to see today people have already caught on to who Jesus was. They knew he was the Messiah. The Jews refused with their hardened heart to believe it. But everybody else that didn't have their hearts hardened, they knew who he was. And they knew there would be a revolt, that they could not put him under arrest without good cause. So they're trying their best. You know, they're going against the Son of Man. They're going against God in the flesh. It's not going to happen until he wants it to happen. But yet still, he's going to pull away from the area of Galilee. And again, could he confront him at that time? Could he confront the government? Absolutely he could. But there was no need, and he knew it. He has to go out, get everything in order. And again, what is he doing here? What we just read through. You know, this is a lesson. You remember when we talked about when he walked on the water? And in Mark's account, he said the disciples' hearts were what? They were hardened, right? And they're still a little bit hardened. We're going to see it today as we progress through this lesson. So, he's in Tyre and Sidon. Again, Tyre is about 20 miles south of Sidon. If you look down here, Jerusalem is down here. I'm sorry for the quality. It looked better on my computer. So it says it's about 100 miles north of Jerusalem, about 50 miles north of Nazareth. And the coast of Phoenicia is about 150 miles, so it goes up a little bit higher than that. But this is the area that he is going to be in. And this was not a Jewish territory, right? These are Gentiles. These are Canaanites. When they went over, you know, back in Joshua's account, they did not wipe them out like they were supposed to. The Canaanites continued to live on. Their influence was there. That paganism was there. But yet this is the location Christ he's traveling to. And, you know, he's doing it for a reason. And sometimes when I read the Bible, it's great to be broken down into verses and you've got them numbered, but sometimes I think we lose the forest for the trees because we don't read it like the story it is. We're not able to comprehend everything that goes on logically as it flows through when you're actually reading it like a book without all those. Because I'll read and I'll say, okay, I'm done with those verses. I'm going to stop there. But let's look at it like the story it is, because he's going to go from here to the Decapolis, and all this is tied together. You know, all this is working through for the disciples' benefit and his training for them. Now, so he's going to heal the daughter of the Canaanite woman. We just read those verses from Mark chapter 7. What do we know about the woman from the verses we just read? So what do we know about her?
Seems like she's a Gentile.
So she's a Gentile. She's a Canaanite woman. And what significance is that in relation to Jesus and the disciples? And this goes back a little bit to Clint's lesson. Clean versus unclean, right? Was she clean or unclean? Based on the Jews. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about the centurion, right? A Gentile. And he stopped Christ before Christ went into his house. Based on Jewish tradition, was that a sin on tradition? I'm not saying God's law, but on Jewish tradition, how they looked at it. Would they consider that a sin if Christ would have entered the house of a Gentile? Yeah, she was not clean. She was not clean. He was not clean. So we know that she's a Gentile, a Canaanite woman. What else do we know?
She worshiped.
So that brings us, this. Look, we'll go back to the map. So look where she's at. And we know where Christ had been. He'd been teaching, and he'd been down to Jerusalem. But he's not been up there. So how did she know about him?
Stories get around.
Yeah. So she believed. She worshiped him, right? So that speaks volumes to who Christ was, what he had done, and what people had actually heard about him. So we had this Gentile woman, and she's worshiping the Lord. She's pleading for her daughter's, life, essentially, because she's dealing with his death. But here she is, you know, and it's fixing to take a turn here for us. What was the attitude of the apostles as we read through these verses? And let's make it a little bit more clear. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 15. Because Matthew makes it a little bit more clear. So let's get Matthew chapter 15, verses 23 through 26.
Jesus did not answer a word, so his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us."
He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel."
But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, Lord, help me.
But he answered and said, "It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs."
All right. So what do you think about the attitude of the apostles here?
We just want to get rid of her.
Which begs the question, and it's hard to tell here, but knowing what had happened with the 5,000, why Christ had sent them away, you know, they were wanting to make him an earthly king. Because Mark tells us when Christ, you know, walked on water, their hearts were hardened. And he knows this. Do you think he wanted to have Christ, do you think they wanted him to kill her and send her away, or just send her away? What do you think?
Probably just send her away. I think probably just send her away.
So it brings the other question, could they have not healed her themselves? Did they have the power at this time to heal this individual, her daughter? They'd already been out on the limited commission, right? And Christ had given them the power. Do you think he took it away when he was back with them? I don't think so. I think that they still had it. So I think you're right. I think they just wanted her done away with. You know, she's making a lot of noise. You know, she's really loud. You know, Christ just sent her away.
It's kind of, I don't know, you kind of put yourself there. It's kind of, that's scary stuff.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, we mentioned the swine.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's unsaid.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And again, this is going to flow through as he goes to the Decapolis. We're going to see how this plays out. And we're going to see how all that ties together to this instance right here and what they're thinking, because they're going to be able to see what happens. You know, they're going to see this unfold when they go back to the Decapolis, which we'll talk about shortly.
I remember a moment when Tony wanted to help this guy. I didn't want him to be by himself, so I went with him, but I really didn't want to deal with that. I just wanted to let it go. Why do we need to do this?
Yeah.
The guy doesn't really want our help anyway, he said so. But Tony kept urging us to go on. And we did what we could to help him. He eventually walked away where we couldn't, but Tony was pretty good at keeping him, trying to help him anyway.
Yeah.
I was like the disciples.
Yeah.
Let's just get rid of this guy. Are you ready to go home? I'm ready to eat, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and again, as Clint's talked about, and he's good about keeping it, and sometimes I'm losing track about this, but from the Beatitudes, from the Sermon on the Mount, this is all about getting their hearts right. You know, because what does it say? You know, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive what? You know, so Christ is wanting to see them here interact. Do you get that? I get that from this, because he's sort of standoffish with it. He's not saying a whole lot. He's letting them interact a little bit with her, even though she's going to him and she knows where the power lies. You know, she didn't go even though the disciples had been out. I'm sure they heard about them, the apostles, and the power they had. She's going to the source. The apostles here, yeah, I mean, this is, and again, they're still learning the lessons as they go through this. They were human. And it's really easy for me to say, these guys were apostles, they were supernatural, and they had a little bit at this point, right? And yet they were still humans within. They still have hardened hearts to a certain extent. And it's very easy to not shake that sometimes. I do it too, Andy. And then I read something like this, and I'm like, you're going to have to fix that. You're absolutely gonna have to fix that. So, Christ responds. How did he respond to it? So first, he sort of ignored her, right? He was being quiet until the apostles stepped in. But how did he respond next?
He said, I didn't come for you. It's not your turn yet. Kind of, in not so many words, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And does that really sound like the Christ that we know? We've seen these interactions before. We saw him with the centurion, right? We saw what he did for this Gentile. So does that sound like Christ in that instance? So what was he doing?
Test.
And who was he testing?
I think so. I think it's a test. To see where her faith was, maybe.
And I think he was testing her first. But I think he was testing her for the benefit of the apostles.
Yeah, that's where I would think so too.
Because again, he has to get these individuals ready to carry on when he's not going to be with them.
Well, he had told the disciples when he sent them out to not go to Gentiles.
Yep.
So he couldn't very well go to the Gentiles either.
Yeah. And he's preparing them. And we know it takes Peter a while to finally say, okay, I got it. I've got it. It's
Yeah,
clicked.
even when he got it, he didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, you know, he was reflecting back on this. I mean, this is not a large, stretch of time. He's reflecting back on this and he's like, oh, yeah, I see it now. And I think we do that a lot in our lives. We're able to, hopefully reflect back and say, okay, I made a mistake, I can learn from it. But how else did he respond to her? So he tells her initially, no, I'm only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. Then how does he respond? It almost takes a step more derogatory, right? What does he tell her? How does he compare her to? What does he compare her to? Dog. Dog, right. So she's a dog now. But again, there's a reason for this. And we know what we've read, and the apostles know, they've seen this man in action. They've seen the Christ, the Messiah word. This is not how he operates normally. So there's something else going on here. It surprised me, when you read this, wow, he calls her a dog. But again, he had a purpose. And first he had to get it out of her, Was she actually, how would you respond, or, somebody, just something similar, and they essentially call you a dog if you're asking for something. I'm not going to get to you, you're a dog. How would you respond?
Most of us would be offended.
So, would you hang around and just,
No. It's like a lot of moxie.
But she had a sick child too.
That's true.
Moms will do a lot
That's
for
right.
a sick child.
Still, even that, our pride's up there though too, right? I mean, we've got that pride. They're going to call me a dog, I'm just going to move on. There's going to be another avenue I can go to. But you're right, Jenny, she knew there really wasn't.
And I think too, she was probably trying to prove to him that she wasn't a dog.
Yep. And that's wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
I mean, was this woman foolish? Or was she
No,
wise?
she's very smart.
Yeah. Now, he's sort of, okay, and the apostles should have saw this too. Okay, this woman, she knows a little bit. She is no fool. She is a wise individual. So she's going to, come right back at him.
Yeah, she was like, throw me a bone or something.
Yeah.
I'll take anything.
Anything. I'll be under your table, underneath the apostles, I'll take any crumb that drops and I will absolutely take it. It doesn't matter. I don't have to be ranked high in your kingdom. Anything. You got something, Tony?
I did, well, it just, even the way he healed this thing, it just makes you think, and that's what Christ always does, he tests his disciples, testing this way. And sometimes we don't want to be tested.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. Because we have to see where we're at.
And we're going to see with her and with us also, we know that he heals this woman's daughter. Why did he heal the woman's daughter? Because, she had wisdom. She showed that. She had humility. What was it?
Faith.
Absolutely. It just came down to the fact. And that's what he was waiting for. And that's what he wanted the disciples, the apostles, to see. When it comes down to it, you're going to look and you're going to see the ones that have faith, they're absolutely working. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm looking for in you. You have to have the faith in me. You've seen all this. Your hearts have been hard. And they're still going to learn. And it comes back on us, right? We're going to have to learn and continue to learn throughout our life. You know, how to have the faith that we need. Because it's going to be tested. And Tony's right, it has to be tested. Or else how do we truly know? You know, it has to be.
She'd already made up her mind, Fred.
Yeah.
She knew this was God.
Yep.
She wasn't.
Yeah.
She was not going to change.
No, I don't think they could have drug her away. No. I mean, she knew who he was, and her faith was that strong. And Christ knew it, you know, but he wanted to hear it. And he wanted the apostles to hear it, where they could understand. And again, just put the stamp of approval. He's fixing to move on to the Decapolis and let them see that in action. So what lessons can we learn from this story? What about persistence? Is it important in our life? What about our prayer life? Do we have to be persistent?
Jesus taught that specifically.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be, and that's what he wants. You know, he don't want, okay, we hit a rough patch in our life, and we all will at some point in time. He don't want us just throw in the towel and give up. Oh, it's just too hard. You know, this Christian walk, it's too hard. I can't do it. I'm going to go back to the ways of the world, and just because I know I can't. But yet we all can. And all we need to have is faith in him to accomplish that. So, what else can we learn from this story?
Be humble.
You got to have humility. Absolutely. So we may want to, you know, to rank out, and as you look at life and you think about it, you know, yeah, I'm going to compare myself to this individual. Well, I'll work to that person's work, and I may want to be a little bit better. You know, we're like ranking ourselves. You know, it's a hierarchy. It doesn't matter in God's kingdom. You just want him. That's it.
Scripture says we compare ourselves to ourselves. We're not wise.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We like to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's in us to do that. Absolutely. You know, from when we're a small age, you know, you're a kid and you got picked for teams in school. Who liked to get picked last? I sure did. I got picked last, but I didn't like it. You know, it's a little bit embarrassing, right? But at least you got on the team, you got to play. It's the same thing here. It doesn't matter. You know, we focus too many times on things like that and how we're going to be viewed by the world. And this woman was considered a dog. The apostles considered her a dog. She was a Gentile. She did not care. Her focus was on Christ. She knew he was the Messiah, and that's all she cared about. She knew what power he held. What about how God responds to us? Is it always going to be in the manner and fashion we want? Because how did he respond to her first? It was a no, right?
He ignored her.
Yeah. He ignored her first. Yeah.
And they don't answer.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be how we want it every time. I mean, and we know this, especially those of us who are a little bit older. I mean, you may want something, and it's not going to come in, especially when it comes, when you're in prayer and you're needing something in your life from God and you're praying to him. I think he'll give you what you need. I know that he will give you what you need. It's not going to be how you envision it. It's not going to be in the form or fashion that you want it. But he'll give us what we need. So Christ knew the hearts of the people. And again, it was all based on their faith. And that's what he was looking for. That's all he was worried about also. All right. Any questions, comments as we move on to when Christ moves to the Decapolis? All right. So he leaves Tyre. He goes north to Sidon. Again, he makes his way back east and south along the Sea of Galilee, and he's going to, end up in the hills off the coast of the Sea of Galilee and the Decapolis. Again, he's wanting to avoid Herod's territory. He didn't need the conflict at this time. Could he have handled the conflict? Yes, there was no reason, though. So that's a lesson in and of itself. Sometimes we may need to get somewhere and we want to face that conflict, just because we can. Unless we don't have to always. If you can avoid it, absolutely avoid it. Somebody will get Matthew chapter 15, verse 30 for me. Matthew chapter 15, verse 30.
Great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, and maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them.
So it was a great multitude, a large crowd, right? So we read when we started out from Mark chapter 5, when Christ left there, what was the attitude of the people? So he cast the demons out of this man into the swine.
They were upset.
They were upset. Did they want him there?
Asked him to leave.
Asked him to leave. So here we are in the same area, a little bit later, and there's a great multitude coming to him. Crowds are coming to this man. And again, this is a pretty large area to be transversing on foot. The only communication is word of mouth, essentially. Even writing would have been difficult to transmit. You're not going to print pages. It's all going to be oral transmission of what he had done. But in this area, they'd already seen what he has done. So what had changed in this area from when Christ left the first time to now he's back? What's the only thing that changed? Because he wasn't here, right? Did his disciples, come to this area and teach and preach? So what's the only thing that had changed? And the key is going to be in verse 20 of Mark chapter 5. It says, and he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. So what do we have there? We have one person. One person in this area, because everybody else wanted him gone. But we have this one individual that's going around telling everybody about this man. So now you see the power of one individual here that he has, the influence that he's going to have on this entire region, from get him out of here, and now we're all going to him. And we're going to see again the story's progressing through. He's fixing to feed a bunch of them again. We were going from 5,000 Jews, now we're going to the Gentiles. Right? So he's going to feed those individuals.
Is this the man that he cast the demons out?
It is. It is. Yep. Yep. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things he had done for him. This one man. And again, he had a powerful story to tell, right? And it was about this man, Jesus, who had saved his life. So these Gentiles now, and again, this is all progressing through for the apostles. They're able to see Christ interact with this Syrophoenician woman, this Canaanite, this Gentile woman, who they thought were a dog, and they thought that she was a dog, because that's how the Jewish thought about Gentiles. And he healed her daughter. And now he's back. He had healed this man. He's in an area of Gentiles. And their hearts, was their heart soft or hard? These individuals coming to him. They obviously didn't have a hardened heart, right? They're hearing this soft, or their hearts are soft, hearing this message from this one man about the Christ, and they're willing to accept it. That's it. This one man. Again, what have the apostles seen up to this point?
They've performed miracles.
They have performed miracles.
They've seen it all. They've performed. They've been empowered.
Yet their hearts, Christ was still working on. He didn't give up. He never gives up. It has to be us that gives up on him. So he never gives up on them. But you see now how their upbringing, and again, these individuals, they're under the old law, and they're following the old law as Christ is following the old law. But that old law, in their interpretation of those traditions that Clint went over, had hardened their hearts. And Christ is working on it. And he's letting them see now, with these Gentile individuals, look at them. All they had was this one man. He didn't have the powers that you guys have. You know, I sent you to the Jews. You didn't get many of them. Even them seeing those, you know, those miracles that you guys could perform and see me perform. And I hear these Gentiles. And again, this is all setting everything into motion for the future that we're now part of and that we now belong to. Mark, as we progress, so we read, you know, he heals the deaf man. So he's performing miracles. And we're not going to get into it, but, you know, when he feeds them, he's pretty much working nonstop with his Gentiles. He's performing miracles, he's healing them, and they want him there. And that's key. Christ couldn't go to Judea, right? They were wanting to kill him. He's now out of Galilee. They're wanting to kill him. Now he is with Gentiles. Those deemed not worthy. And he's there, and they're happy to see him. So there's been a change in heart in these individuals. And that's the key difference. The first interaction with Christ to the next. They're just hearing about him, and they're believing in him. And we need to do the same. We need to read these stories. We need to have faith that Christ is who he says he is and was. You know, and we know we have it here. I don't think there's any way you can refute it. You know, he is the Messiah. But a big message here to me is one man was able to do this. One man was able to change the hearts of thousands of individuals. How often do we look at ourselves and like, yeah, I really can't. You know, I can't talk to someone. I can't have an impact on anybody's life, really. But how could this one man that was unlearned know all he was doing? What do you think his message was? Do you think it was a complex message? What do you think his message was?
I met this man that he was saying, you know how I was. I met this man that totally healed me. And he can probably do the same for you. It was probably that simple, I think.
That's it. And you know, as we read through the story about this man in Mark chapter 5, he was a well-known individual in and of himself. Right? So people knew him. I'm sure it was like a spectacle. Let's go watch this man that's chained up here. You know? People, you know, what else did you do back then? You know, if you're not gathering food and working, you've got a lot of time on your hands. Now, let's just go watch this guy. And now all it was this man who'd been healed in his simple message about this man, you know, he was saved. You know, if he can do this for me, think about what he can do for you. And that's the simple message. And he was able to change the hearts of thousands just with that message. Any questions, comments on those verses? Okay, so we'll just end it here. What did we learn today from this? What did anybody learn today, if anything, from this?
One thing is the gospel is for all people through all times. It's a universal message.
Yep.
It's something that's been paid for one time, and it's good for everyone, including the Syrophoenician, including the Anglo-Saxon or Caucasian.
And you bring up a good point with her. This is not the first time in Jewish history that they had seen something similar. Who did Elijah go to? And I don't know if it was you that spoke about it or Andy recently.
But to the widow.
Yeah. Zarephath. So they've seen this sort of play in their history. The Jewish individuals have seen this. God's telling them, you were not worthy, right? You know, when the kingdom was divided, in the northern kingdom, you know, they're rebelling against God. Eventually, the southern kingdom, Judah does, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go. Elisha's going to a Gentile. And again, we hear Christ again, and you know that was going on. Again, the apostles were Jews. They knew the law. This had to be in the back of their mind also, which should have, and I think it's a lesson to us here. It's just coming to you, you know. It's shoot from the hip here, but they knew the lesson of the widow of Zarephath, that Elijah went to her. Why could they not place themselves in that situation here when Christ was in the same area, and he was, with a Gentile woman? And they knew the story when Elijah went there, because the Jews, their hearts were not right. They were rebelling against God. The prophets were constantly trying to get their hearts right. And that's what the prophets were doing, you know, over and over. You know, Isaiah tells them, you've got to get your heart, you know, fix yourself. And they had this in their back pocket, just like we had the Bible in our back pocket. And just like Andy said, we're still going to stumble with it. You know, and we know these lessons. But again, that's why we're here to study and we're here to learn is, okay, I'm going to fall into this, but I can fix it. Next time, I need to think about what I know, what the Bible tells me. I need to step back a little bit and think, okay, yeah, I know something similar. I've seen Christ interact in this situation. I know how to respond to it. So, again, it's great, just, you know, many great messages in here. What else did we learn today, if anything? What about our faith? Did you learn anything about how faith should be? Should it be persistent? I mean, absolutely. You just got to be persistent. I mean, you may be on a nice, steady, you know, walk, and you're moving up, and everything's good, and then you may trip and fall. But you've got to keep that faith. You know, we have to be persistent with it. What about the ability to make a difference in the world? Can you do it by yourself? This one man did through Christ. You can make a difference, absolutely. Is it easier when you have others with you? It is. You know, that's why we need the church.
And that's what his disciples turned the world upside down. And it's really not by the miracles. Mm-hmm. It's by proclaiming a message. Yeah. That's how they do. And that's how we're to do it. You know, that's it's for everyone, like you said earlier.
And they proclaimed a message, but they showed the faith to go along with it. And that's how we know it's true. Because they, even in the face of death, they didn't bother on it. You know, I'm going to die for this. And that's how you can see that this is the truth. Because I have nothing else to gain. There's no riches. I'm not gaining land. I'm not gaining popularity from this. I'm losing my life for this. And that's how you know it's true. And that's how much faith I have. Anything else?
Whenever they sent Jesus to trial, they were hard pressed to find any witnesses that were against Jesus. Even the ones that they found were arguing amongst each other about what the facts were.
Yeah.
And had they asked, are there any witnesses on Jesus' behalf, they'd have found thousands of people.
Absolutely. Because we know the large area in a short period of time that good news spread to. And there was many that believed thereafter. Anything else?
I think you can learn that God's no to yourself may be to benefit somebody else that's watching how you respond.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Very good point.
Well, it's just there's a truth, and it only comes from God. And if you don't love it, you end up like the ones that want to kill it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get rid of this. So that I don't like it.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I appreciate your participation this morning. Thank you very much.
No, I just, she doesn't really give away her birthday. So I didn't say who it was.
We are.